Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad.
Yeah, very well here.
Swanny. Swanny's still recovering, aren't you, darling?
I am a little bit, but I'm feeling much, much better today. And actually, I thought I sounded great until I put the headphones on. I can hear a little bit, but I think I'm doing pretty well, all things considered.
I've got to say, you sound fine to me, but I've got to tell you this. I was listening to a very early episode of ours, and if you ever wonder whether or not the work that you had done on your nasal cavities has helped, it's unbelievably better because
it's
the
remarkable.
the amount of, I don't know if you were sniffing or what you were doing, but it is so obvious that your sinuses are blocked. Yeah. And I thought, that really has changed. That's
and it's funny because
I can tell the difference.
Yeah, when it comes to when I have been unwell since, and I mean, obviously those first couple of months were a bit touch and go, and I was questioning whether I had done the right thing at times. But once it came good, it really has. And having had COVID, and when things happen normally, because that was my weak thing, it would take me to the ground, and I'd be so sick, and then it would be like a month or more of trying to clear my sinuses, and then up and down, and the biggest shift for me is the fact that because they must be able to clear, or they're not at a base which is already terrible, I've got a chance to actually get better. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it was just, here we go. I'd be going, and I think that combined with the fact that I knew that was the case, it was a bit of a misery, really. So having had COVID and just coming out of the side, I'm still testing positive, but I think that might be for a case. But I would hope we'll be back to business tomorrow, and I think I'm pretty lucky, really. Fingers crossed that, the sweaty nights are behind me.
So much fun, isn't it? Yeah.
You forget what that's like until you wake up in a cold, wet bed and you go, oh my God. It all comes flooding back, right? And you're like, oh, that's right. That's being
right,
sick.
the cold sweats.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. So, they didn't have that last night, so I think I'm pretty good.
And how are you
boys?
How are you guys? Sorry.
Yeah.
We're a little overhung today.
Oh, you do look a little bit rough now that I have a little bit of look.
I think you went
to bed
cold later, but Stuart was about 2:30. So,
And what was the cause for celebration?
I had some old work colleagues came up from Melbourne.
Oh, hijinks.
Yeah. So,
lovely.
Karaoke on the deck?
In the spa.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of
you lot have a thing for spa entertaining, don't you?
Yeah.
And I can see why now, having partaken. I've never done that until the night before Schmitty's wedding, to be fair. But it's a slippery slope, isn't it? Literally and figuratively.
It is.
Yes. And how about you two?
Oh yeah, I'm good. And of course, who are we? I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarkey, and together we are
Trial
by Wine.
And what are we drinking?
Well, we denied.
Oh, as to whether you would.
Yeah. So Stuart's not having a drink. And I've poured myself a glass of 2019 Deriff from Andrew Buller Wines here in Rutherglen. So, yes, we'll struggle through that.
I don't know how you can do that. That is not a thing that I have ever been able to do. No, I've always been, forgive my French, but piss weak when it comes to that. I don't know. I've never been able to do it. It's like what's it called? That first night frenzy. I go hard. I definitely am a binge drinker, but I can't back it up. Fortunately,
today I'm not hungover, and I am drinking a glass of Pepper Jack Shiraz.
Ooh.
And Tony's joining me as well today in the Shiraz. So we started this bottle last night. We went to one of the fine restaurants around Ilden and had a Parma and a bottle of wine, and then we went home and we started this one, but we didn't get all the way through it. So, and it's actually a 2015, and I think that's simply because it was sitting in the let's call it the cellar, otherwise known as somewhere in a cupboard in the houseboat. So, Swanny, what have you got for us today, Dal? in terms of a story?
I do have a story, and my story it's a real departure, and I think it reflects my state of mind in the last couple of days, and I just couldn't stomach anything too macabre. And given what I brought to the table last time, it was, time that I took a little bit of a lighter route into crime. So my only prerequisite was I didn't want to have to do too much reading because my eyes were a bit iffy. So I found myself a documentary, and that was my starting point for this story. And my sources are historychannel.com, nys.com, it's just a website. This one made me laugh. Encyclopedia Britannica.
I've used it once or twice.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Just some YouTube videos, Wikipedia, CBS News, New York, and the documentary. But maybe I'll tell you the name of the documentary.
The documentary's going to give it away,
Otherwise
is it?
Give it away. Yeah. You'll notice there's no Murderpedia. There's no.
Does that mean there's no murder?
It might well mean that. What we do have, though, there is definitely a crime, and I'm just going to give you a couple of. I don't know if you'd call them buzzwords. They're hardly that, but just a couple of things to throw into the mix to pique your interest and see if you have any idea where this crime might lead us. They're no particular order. The words are Sydney, Oscar winner, artist, Aussie, children's book. Okay, so nothing particularly macabre. We haven't got toy box.
No.
we
haven't got 18-inch
toolbox.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. Okay. So that sort of gives you an idea that no idea of where we're sort of headed, I guess. It's just maybe...
Was Sydney the location or was Sydney a name?
It was actually Sydney as a location.
Right.
Our story starts, the person of interest, shall we say, is a gentleman called Philippe Petit, and he was born in 1949. Little Phil. Little Phil. Thank you. We've got it coined already. I'm just wondering what we're going to call him. Little Phil.
Little Phil.
Little Phil. Little Phil was born in 1949.
Yeah.
Just outside Paris in, I don't know if it's a village or a town. I had a look, but it's called Nemours-Seine-et-Marne, which is basically in that the sort of area that surrounds Paris. So not within it, but sort of not far from it. So you'd easily be able to access Paris, but not in Paris. So he was born there.
Greater suburbs.
Yeah, he had a pretty ordinary upbringing. His father had been an author and a pilot in the army, and he just seemed to have a young kind of joyous childhood, I think, in pretty much the French countryside. And he discovered that he really enjoyed magic and juggling. He liked to climb, and he was just a really sort of agile young man. And, there's nothing more to it than that. And then one day when he's about 17 years old, he is sat in a dental practice alongside, everybody. And I've seen images of sort of, it was old school where everyone had the thing tied, the ice tied under their chin because they've all got, terrible things.
Yeah.
And in the waiting room, he was reading a magazine. And in the magazine, there was an article about these new buildings that were going to be built in New York. And what there was a depiction of the Eiffel Tower, and then next to it was what would become the World Trade Center, or Trade Center. Well, it is the World Trade Center, but the towers, the Twin Towers. And he was absolutely blown away by the scale difference between the Eiffel Tower, which was, it is a huge building, very structure, incredibly tall. And if that was, your
baseline or
yeah, exactly, then to see that scale to be so drastically so much larger or much taller, he was totally captivated. And what he did was he sneezed so he could rip that page out of the magazine, and he ran out of the dental surgery and said that basically he suffered with sore tooth for the next week and a half while it got better, because he just didn't even stay to see the dentist because something had been lit inside him, totally inspired. And he had a dream. What would that dream be? Somehow must connect to the World Trade Center.
To move to Sydney?
No, not to move to Sydney. Yeah. So, sorry, I just opened I'm going to crack open what do we call this? It's an old school DC.
Jeez, it is.
You know how people do that when they're like influencing? They always put their hand behind it? You probably don't, because it's probably with makeup.
I don't look at
They
shit.
show you and I'm like, piss off.
So he had a dream.
He certainly did. He had a dream.
Building to build.
And what is quite interesting is this was in 1966. And I went and sort of did a little bit of research on the World Trade Center. And 1966 was, I think, when they broke ground. So it wasn't completed until, and it wasn't even complete, that's not quite, it was opened in 1973, but it wasn't yet complete. So it was actually completed in 1975. So this is early on. So he's got this image in his head. He has this interest, and the World Trade Center is just something that he can't even get his head around, but he is something, it sparked something inside of him.
Sparked joy.
It did, certainly sparked joy. And it's important to know what that sparked and what his interests were. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, but he is essentially, I don't even know what you call someone who's interested in magic and juggling other than a juggler.
A clown?
A clown, yeah.
A clown without, he's absolutely not a clown. It's kind of hard to tell. But what he is he's a self-taught, what is called a wire walker.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. So he had a bit of interest in it. And
a wire walker or a tightrope walker?
They call it a wire walker, but it's not dissimilar. It's kind of the same thing.
Like tightrope? Okay, right.
It is one the same, I think. But I think tightrope
circus performer.
suggests
we were
something
close with clown.
slightly different. Yeah, wire walker, I think, has more scope. So his quote is saying, within 1 year, I taught myself to do all the things you could do on a wire. I learned the backward somersault, the front somersault, the unicycle, the bicycle, the chair on the wire, jumping through hoops. But I thought, what is the big deal here? It looks almost ugly. So I started to discard those tricks and to reinvent my art. And that's a quote that I want to sort of give you up front. This guy, little Philippe Petit, he sees himself as an artist. And it's interesting that we talk about, we've talked about clowns and circuses and whatnot. He really doesn't identify himself necessarily with that or with that culture. He is trying to look bigger and trying to refine his skill and make it a show in a way that is in a more artistic kind of venture. So, as I said, he's self-taught, and his idea is that he wants to do his wire walking in places that are breathtaking both for him and for anybody who's watching him. So his first port of call has to be Paris, right? He's living outside Paris, and he starts to, along with his friends, he has a young girlfriend and sort of a group of mates. And I don't know what it is, but every documentary you ever see of people born that are in those ages, everybody's interesting. Everybody's up for an adventure. Everybody's educated or interesting. I mean, I just don't see that from my era or from, times that come after. These people are really up for something. Anyway, no one more than little Phil. So little Phil has an idea. And his idea is that he wants to put a wire up between the two towers of Notre Dame. And then he wants to do a wire walk between those two towers. So by 1971, he's able to sort of plan, and they sneak in and out of Notre Dame, and they come up with a plan. They work out how they're going to rig it up. And then in, I think it's June of 1971, at a height of 69 metres.
Yeah, that'll kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to get my head around because
couldn't
without
bear it.
showing
I hate
you.
heights.
I know.
I couldn't.
But I think we're all kind of familiar with Notre Dame. But imagine those two top towers, and that's where he's crossing. It is really high. So it's him alone up there with his friends have helped. And meanwhile, down in the nave, what's it called inside the big house? There are priests that are being ordained. Apparently,
is that the nave? Yes,
it would be the nave. I don't know.
Yeah,
could be. I'm not sure. And so down underneath, the streets of Paris are filled, and people are looking up, thinking, "Oh my God, what are we watching?" And the footage that they've taken, because there's real footage that his friends took, it is breathtaking in the sense that he is so confident, and he just becomes this. I don't know, I guess it's because he's an artist. He crosses backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and all of Paris. He's got this incredible, or anyone filming him, he's got this incredible vista of, looking down at little islands where crosses over the river and down to the left bank. And it's remarkable, but that's just his sort of starting point, because he's got bigger and better things in mind. So he's already been caught there. He wasn't charged, but obviously he was trespassing, but he's just thinks it's the greatest thing ever. And, while he's up there, he sees it as a performance. He's lying he doesn't just walk backwards and forwards, he lays down he sits down on the wire. He's totally at ease up there, not a fear in the world. After that, he's like, okay, where can I go next? And the next place he ends up is actually Sydney. And I was never aware of this, and I still, other things sort of twig something in your memory. It was before it was before I was born, but in June sometime in 1973, all of a sudden he's arrived in Sydney. And this is what I find quite remarkable, is how much travel is involved with what he does. And, it wasn't that airfare was cheap, but I mean, someone must have been paying for that. So sure enough, he turns up in Sydney, and on the northern pylons of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they do the same thing. They strap up, he and his accomplices, his friends, and they put the wire across the two northern pylons. So if you were in North Sydney, you'd be looking down that side. So I guess just up from Kirribilli, you'd have Luna Park down.
Yeah, Luna Park,
yeah. So Luna Park side. So they had to break into the pylon. So there's already, breaking into trespass. And then up they've gone. And then the thing that makes me laugh is in all the footage, whenever he has done one of these walks, you see how the locals interact, but watching how the Australian police react, it's just like, what's that French kid, what's going on, what kind of a clown's out there? And he had on, in a very sort of, imagine if he looked sort of like Marcel Marceau. He had black slacks, like a black tight top, black ballet shoes. You could just imagine what the Australian, I don't even want to say it, but what the Australian police would have been thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be, look at his joie de vivre.
No, they were not thinking, and they didn't treat him like that either. But so the big issue, and as anyone who has lived in Sydney, it brought the traffic on the Harbour Bridge to a stop. And once that happens, people are pissed off. So you see, the police are going upstairs, and they're treating him really brutal. Exactly. They weren't well pleased. So this has occurred. So there he's saying again, I just think that people are just a different time. Let's just move him on. But quite a big commitment, don't you think, to fly from Paris to Sydney to do that? And at what expense, right? Yeah. I mean, it was spectacular.
What year was that?
That was 1973.
Yeah,
so he'd done Notre Dame in 71.
And slow.
This is where I get to. Yeah, expensive and slow. And, and it was kind of like it was a little bit of a mission, I think, he had a bigger plan, which we'll come on to next, and he was trying to sort of find a band of accomplices. So at this point, there was a gentleman called Mark who became his friend, who was a student in Sydney, and he'd met Mark and, a couple of people, but it's like uni students and, people hanging out. They're just, no one's got real jobs. I mean, you're not planning something like that and head up after a day work. Do you know what I mean? They're just, this is their thing. This is how they exist. Some of them studied. They just, I don't know, it was a cheap, life was easier, I think. Things were cheaper in some respects. But the long distance travel, I just still think at an expense, right? And carrying equipment and these big wires that need, they're heavy. Getting them around wouldn't have been an easy task. But, this is just me and the way I think, and I just sort of think, well, there's not a lot of information.
Not even knowing how you would attach the wire, whether you could even get up to the top, like all of that. What if you got there and just went, we can't do it?
Correct. It would be
surely
a pretty short
you would have
adventure.
got someone to do a reconnaissance mission beforehand.
They definitely would, but this is a thing.
Just flown over with a big fat coil of wire and gone, we'll just chance it, guys.
Well, to be honest, there's not a lot of information on it. So how that actually worked out or not, who knows? But my favourite footage is just these two. I don't even know what you would have called the police, but they wore. This will ring a bell if you can think back. If there was something that was going on where they had to get a little bit dirty, so the policemen were in white overalls that said police on the back, and they're trying to jump. You know how there was the rail line? They're trying to jump over like the high, I guess it's not barbed wire, but those things to get to a point to get into the pylon, to get up the pylon themselves. And they were in those jumpsuits, and I was like, oh God, I forgot they used to wear that. And they just looked so amateurish, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And pissed off.
Well, now if you don a grey and blue one and pay, I can't remember how much was it, boys, because when we did it, we walked the bridge. I don't know what this guy's carrying on about. We walked the bridge. We've got photos to prove it. Big deal.
Did you see that Obama did it recently and he and Michelle didn't have to wear the regulation jumpsuit?
No.
They're the only people who haven't, and it was a real... People were not well pleased, especially people taking their photos. No one wants to be in a grey jumpsuit, right? So from Sydney, whilst he's still in Sydney, no doubt, taking, in the sights, having been released by the police, our friend Philippe Petit sends a postcard to a friend of his in Paris with no writing. It just has his friend's address. And the postcard is the World Trade Center, Trade Center Towers, and all he puts is one little line that links the top of the World Trade Center and sends it to his friends, and his friends are like,
that is mad.
I know he's talked about it, it's always talked about, but are we really going to do this? Anyway, so this is the crime, okay? So it's considered by some the artistic crime of the century. And what Philippe Petit calls it is le coup, because he thought if he could pull this off, this will be
it is a coup.
It will be incredible. But again, like we talk about this often with most crimes. It's a crime of the times. I don't know that you would be able to do it now. And I think if you did, what you would have to do to pull it off would mean that you would commit many more crimes than they did.
Can't do it now.
Yeah. Oh, I can't believe I just said, oh, that's so inappropriate. I'm so sorry. Oh God.
We didn't mean.
Oh my God.
I'm an inappropriate one for pointing
I just said that. I can't believe I just said that. And I wasn't thinking about the final bit. I'm thinking about the lead up. Yeah. Oh God.
What you meant was it's not the kind of thing. Regardless of the buildings, it's not the kind of thing that you could really get away with in this day and age. Probably a lot to do with because of things like terrorism. Security is a lot greater on a lot of these buildings, etc. So it was a bit unfortunate, but I know that you didn't mean.
Oh God, that sounds horrendous. I can't believe
it didn't. It was more my teasing you that sounded worse. So I'll take that one.
Ooh, excuse me. Little Phil heads back to Paris, and it sort of becomes clear at this time that he's been planning for this the whole time. And in his mind, and what he's been doing is they'd rigged up in the field outside Paris where they lived, the wire, and he practices like they shake it. They do as many things to him to keep him on busy. Yeah. And then there's, how are we going to do this? The towers weren't yet finished, remember? So he just had this idea of what he wanted to do. And so to be able to do that, they start doing these, and it's plural, I guess, reconnaissance missions to New York. So they're flying from Paris to New York, and on each of these trips, they do a little bit more investigation, and that's where, some of the crimes come into play, and some of them are not necessarily all crimes, but some of it's like, it is like you'd think it's like a made-for-TV movie, because it was just a more innocent time, and the things they could get away with, they're nearly cute in retrospect. So off to New York, they start going.
Cute crimes.
Walkers.
Little Phil, you're so cute. Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Be pissing over.
So he's quoted as saying it took him 6 years to plan. But the 6 years really did start from the moment that he was in that dental practice. And he starts learning everything he can about the Twin Towers. He read every book, every article, because remember, it wasn't like he could go on the internet, and it wasn't as if he could really access things like
weekends. Have the original Encyclopedia Britannica.
Even that wouldn't have been up to date. Remember, you have to wait for it to come, and it only came out every 70 years.
That's right. I've got the old version. It doesn't exist yet. Right.
Yeah.
So we had and I won't tell you who they sort of were. We had a group of friends. There was probably about 6 of them. And he and his co-collaborators, and they changed. They would come in and out of focus depending on what they had going on in their lives, whether or not they'd get to a point and they'd think this is mad. But they were genuinely friends, and there's so much footage. They filmed everything because they knew they were about to do or embark on something that would be remarkable. And
that's your favourite thing, crimes where people filmed it all?
Absolutely, because I just can't believe what I'm watching half the time, because it could go totally wrong, right, or totally right, and it was remarkable. But so whilst the towers are still under construction, he's got his wire rigged up outside Paris. He's practicing that. They do it all the time, and they're trying to come up with ideas of, once these towers are ready to be scaled, how would we then be able to attach a wire between the North and the South Tower?
That's what I'm wondering.
That in and of itself
shoot it across like a Mission Impossible type thing.
That's exactly what they ended up having to do.
Oh, look at that. I've seen too many movies. That's the point.
So I'll read something here just from Wikipedia, but it's like, and the equipment's heavy, right? So they're going to have to get up to the top of the towers and then get across. So in planning for it, there are 2 sort of stages of planning. You've got your trips to New York, and you've got what's going on in the field. And in the field, the footage has them, like, it's beautiful grass. It's this French countryside, and these long-haired friends who are like, they're not quite hippies, but, French artists. And
I feel like they are.
It's like, it's so beautiful. Do you know what I mean? And at this time, he would put his girlfriend on his shoulders and he'd be walking across. And
of course
then there'd be two people because he was so strong. This lean, little ripped little thing, never got a shirt on, doing it in jeans and with these little ballet pumps and backwards and forwards to go. Then they'd go to New York. And when they were in New York, one of the things that he would do is he was observing people. It was all about trying to work out what was happening. So at the beginning, the first stages when they would first go over, they were still complete. So people had yet to move into the building. And he would watch workmen, how they would come and go from the building, how would trucks enter, what did people look like, what were their uniforms, what were the businesses that they were representing. And it was all about, he was kind of a spy essentially.
I know it's innocent-ish, but it's still creepy.
Of course it is. And, the thing is with this crime, and we'll get to at the end, is it goes one way, but you tilt that filter or that lens slightly and it becomes a whole different experience.
You plan to bomb somewhere.
Correct.
So all of
and
this
is how they do it.
Doing,
And this is why this crime is very interesting. It's like, it's all good until it's not. And then what could have happened more often than not is where the interest lies, I guess,
also,
for us.
I don't know this story.
Yep.
So I don't know if he successfully actually manages to walk across. But if he falls, he could kill people down where he splats.
Of course.
there's so much other collateral damage that can happen.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
How would you sentence him if he did do that, Schmitty?
We'll get to it.
We'll get to that. That is how it will work.
I have a bad feeling about where this is going.
So in New York, one of the other things that they do is he and one of his collaborators, they hire a helicopter so they can get above the World Trade Center, and they tell the helicopter, pilot some cockamamie story about why they're doing it, and they take their cameras up and they take all of the photos of the top of the World Trade Center, because the top of the World Trade Center, and particularly at that point, it wasn't like it was just some flat slab with an air conditioning unit. It still was not complete. So the photos that I've seen of it, there's still crane, there's probably a crane on it, but it kind of looks like it's a bulldozer bit with a crane. It must be so heavy to be able to lift things up. But there are lots of different things going on up there. So they've taken photos of both towers, and then they take that imagery back and he starts to build a model. And in the model, what he's trying to work out is, if I get a wire across, what will that offer me? Is that enough? And then what he discovers is that if he has the wire with the two buildings and their distance at that height, which, for your information, is a quarter mile, which is about 400. One of them's 410 and one of them's 411 meters.
That's a long way to shoot a wire across. Yeah.
No. That's the height.
Oh, sorry.
400 meters is the height.
Right. I was going to say they're that far
distance
apart.
Across, which I did write down, the distance across doesn't feel like it's that far. In fact, he doesn't think couldn't be that. I thought the distance felt quite close relative to what they look like. Like it's 30 meters.
Yeah, they must be much closer than
So the height is a quarter
that was me being
mile.
dumb. Got it right.
The height is a quarter mile.
They're very tall.
410, 411 meters. They each have 110 stories. So one of them is 1,368 feet. The other one's 1,362. Don't know why that is. It's probably just the stuff that sits on the top, to be honest. And that doesn't include all the things that have gone on since, like the antennas and the different things that were used for like communication, whatever else. But it is very high and it's very windy up there. So they were also having to take that into consideration. And one of the things is, if the wire goes across, how you have these things, it's called a cavaletti, and a cavaletti is something that will kind of anchor the single rope that you're going to walk on. So it's very difficult for me to try and tell you guys. You kind of need to see it. Close your eyes and imagine the one line going from both buildings, so one building to the other, and then what they do is they have two other wires that kind of diagonally go and they anchor it. So the rope is not about going super tight across. It has to have some very fine degree of sort of slackness in it. Not slack, but not when we talk about tight. It's tight, but it's not to the point where it can't move at all, because then you'd bounce off, right?
Yeah. Look at you and the science and the physics and the shit.
Oh, but it's all that stuff when you start to think about what they had to do and how clever they had to be to create something that was going to work.
Just, not done this because, hey.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed
little
that
Phil had a vision.
Had a dream. I'm amazed that they can do it, though. Like, imagine having to break in to get onto the roof, to then do that, to then anchor it. and no one
What's
finds
the
out.
ones that they use? I think is it Mission Impossible or something like that in Kuala Lumpur. Is that the tallest building in the world? Yeah.
Oh no, we're the
Petronas
Towers. They're not. They're tall, but we're there recently. They're still there.
They're still pretty tall, I'd say. They're just not the tallest.
They are very tall. We were there recently, and we stayed in a hotel next to it. And when we were in the pool with the kids, looking up overnight, because it's better to go in the night in the pool because the towers are all lit up. The clouds would cover it, and they go. And you couldn't even see. And I'm sure you could half of it couldn't see the clouds for that.
Crazy.
So it's that high.
I also don't like the really tall ones because you actually can feel them moving slightly.
This is absolutely true.
I hate that. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
I don't believe this is right.
No.
It's been a while since I've been in a really tall building. I used to have a real thing for it, but it's been a long time since I have.
And so in Japan, they build tall buildings with
sways.
A bit more flexibility
earthquakes,
because of earthquakes.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I like my buildings to feel like they're not going to fall over when I'm in them.
Yeah. We went up to like the 70th floor of one, and it's a viewing platform, and the building was moving. I had to go. I couldn't go anywhere near the windows. I had to stay in near the
because you're scared of... You've got the heights issue that I have too.
Heights, massively.
Acrophobia, is it? Acrophobia, yes.
Not aggro.
Aggro is space.
No,
it's space. So acrophobia is heights. Yeah, because I looked it up in the context of this.
You're very, very well researched today, Swanny.
I found it, sometimes I can't believe the things that I read or that I see. Do you ever find that where you just go, what? What do you mean you thought that was an idea? What did you mean when one of your friends said, I'm going to do that? You thought, I'll help. No, that's crazy. No. So they're doing their to and fro going. So they've had the helicopter. He's spent a lot of time outside.
Pointless.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what gets me about it. It's pointless. Just because I can, or just because I just want to show that I can.
I found my note here. There's 200 feet, which is 60 metres. It's 60 metres between the two towers. So if he was to be able to cross, one crossing would be 60 metres. Yes, quite a distance. Oh. It's not like you're like going a couple of metres. It's a fair distance. And, in listening to how they talk, it's for them, it's that real French, like that, feeling free and having liberty, and they want to be creative, and it wasn't. They had good upbringing.
So
they were just
and artistic,
and that's exactly how they talk. They're nearly like, and they talk the collaborate. They're nearly in tears with the beauty of it all. They're so blown away by their own view of what they were doing and what they were involved in. It was quite.
Of course, I am French. Where else am I speaking in this outrageous accent?
Oh gosh, it's very good. It's very good. Yeah. Okay, so
it's not.
As we get to a point where the World Trade Center is open, the World Trade Center, that the official opening when it wasn't actually totally finished, was in June of 1974. So in 1973, he's been in Sydney, right? 1970. So he's gone back, and in that year, they must have gone back 3 or 4 times between. And I'm like, I could only find one source of who funded this, because they never mentioned it in the documentary.
I was wondering that before we were talking about
who the hell paid this, because they didn't have jobs. All they talked about was this.
They're just scallywags running around the French countryside. Who's paying for all of this?
And who do you think?
I think this is even more ridiculous. I've got a massive note where I wrote who paid, and all it says is
Brando.
It wasn't me.
No.
Oscar winner?
It was at the connection. No. Edith Piaf.
It was a German juggler. What kind of?
Of course it was.
And you know what? I didn't look him up at the time, but it says Francis.
Hang on, was that his last name? Juggler? Because he's German.
He must be the richest juggler. He must have been
Francis Juggler.
Francis Brunn.
How do you make so much money out of juggling?
Let's see if it even comes up, because
he was already rich.
Oh, you're probably right.
Yeah,
you're probably right. Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Francis Brunn
was
a German juggler. Brunn took up juggling in 1939, joining a travelling show that played all over Europe. He moved to America to join the Ringling Brothers Circus. He twice
the Ringlings. That's big.
It says here Brunn helped Philippe Petit financially for the 1974 war. Yeah.
Right, Petit.
But I don't. How this guy afforded this, because there was so much. Well, they had to have accommodation. They had their flights. Maybe I'm looking at it thinking how I am in today's I mean, they were all,
the
locked into a
flights
little
would have
apartment.
been
But
expensive.
the flights, right?
Yeah, they would have. Sure.
Would have been.
Tony's here as an expert witness. How much did it cost to fly between the UK and Australia in 1974?
Have you still got the ticket?
Are they economy?
I
Yes.
assume they're economy. Yeah.
Funny enough, it's been about the same for a long, long time, about 1,500.
Is that right? That's a lot of
I
money.
don't believe that.
Yeah.
Well,
but I mean, Paris to New York would have been less.
$1,500 in
£1,500
the 70s. Where do you find that kind of pound? You could probably buy a house for £1,500 in
precisely,
Australia
right?
back
So
then.
that yes, precisely. You could. I think some people were buying houses in the 70s.
I reckon $10,000 would.
Not much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
More than that.
For not much. I love the specificity of it all.
Like £20,000 or something. Like not £1 million or $1 million. Yeah.
I think it's that idea as there were no expenses. I don't think they ate, they didn't drink, they didn't have anything. They were totally focused on their task. Everything would have gone to that. They just existed. Do you know what I mean?
I'm sure they're very thin. I can see this man. He's like Marceau and his leotard.
He is like Marceau and his black slacks and black bodysuit.
There was enough musculature to be able to not fall off a wire, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. He had a good core going on, trust me.
Oh.
Is that what really got you into this story?
No, really not. You have a look. When you see little Phil, I don't know that you'll... no, it's not a... No.
Runty Phil.
You know exactly what I mean.
It's a no from me.
It's a hard no. It's a hard
It's
pass.
little Runty Phil. Okay.
Not my cup of tea. But what he did do, he, along with a photographer friend that he had in New York on one of the trips that they went, God knows how many, let's say there were 3 or 4. It felt like there were at least 3 or 4. They had contacted, I think it is the Port Authority, and they got in touch and they said, we represent a French magazine called Metropolis. And I think it was about building and construction. They said, we'd like to do an interview. And they were like, oh, sure. Because what is really important, and I will sort of talk about now, is the World Trade Center was not this particularly light project. It was viewed by some as ugly. Others thought it was kind of in this sort of weird spot because where it was built, where it is
like the Eiffel Tower.
Everything, right? People don't like it at first. And, if you do, I mean, we've grown up in a different time and have a different relationship with it. Even before September 11, it was different for us. But, I mean, imagine if you were sort of in New York or in the US, and as it rose, it was sort of like, they say it was, America's sort of soaring ambition and innovation, technological prowess was supposed to be there, but it was very in your face.
Yeah.
And it was so big and there was nothing else really around it because it was, that whole area was sort of cleared down where it was sort of near the financial district, but it's kind of off to there. So I think it was sort of a project between actually New Jersey and New York State, but it wasn't well loved. And so anybody who was interested in, they said, oh, well, the French are interested. All right. So there was no pushback to that interview at all. And the interview, they took them up to the roof where they wanted to be. And there were supposed to be taking photos of one thing. And this is where a lot of the photography took place, where they would go, this is where we can anchor this. Correct. While asking them, and they were so clever.
Pretending to do some spy cam work.
Can you just go and stand by that potential anchor point so we can take a photo of you?
Yes. And tell me, when you had construction workers up here and the weather came in, how quickly did the weather change? What were the weather conditions? How windy did it get up here? Oh, no. And then the guy would go, oh, yeah, like the head construction guy, we'd have to shut down the site. It'd get so windy, there were days where we'd have to stop, they'd have to go down. Because as it got higher, obviously the weather conditions had a greater impact on it. And the thing that I guess was of greatest concern was, obviously if the weather was going to be terrible, they wouldn't have embarked on it, but wind and how quickly the weather changed. So whilst they're interviewing on behalf of Metropolis, impersonating these journalists from Paris, that's where a lot of these questions were sort of asked by people who had truly spent time up there. And they were so happy to share the information, not really knowing what they were doing, just seeing all these Frenchies are here and they had, the guy, the US photographer, the French. And meanwhile, they've got these photos of Philippe sort of crawling down into areas he probably shouldn't be. And they're thinking, hey, is he all right? No, he's good kind of thing.
Just checking it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is what French journalists do. We like to crawl down into weird spaces and take photos of all the
really
vents,
get a feel.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you can do a little ID that's from your computer or someone prints it out in the local print shop. Going, oh, here we go. I work for this publication. Maybe it would be easier with 3D printers and stuff to do that now. I don't know, but the idea of even embarking on something like this feels like it's in a movie now versus what you do in real life.
Yeah.
So they were able to.
Is that an indictment on our current life?
Oh, perhaps.
Has all of our freedom and all of our liberty been taken from us that we can't dream a dream of going to Kuala Lumpur?
A troll by wine adventure.
Towers, yeah.
So we can base jump off them.
Oh, because they would be really happy up there if that would happen.
Yeah, that was my dream when I was at 17 in the dentist.
So what is interesting at this point is when they're impersonating the journalists, though, they use their real names. So they weren't pretending to be someone else per se. So in terms of a crime, you know, they weren't mean-spirited or criminal as such. It was all this kind of just trying to get by. How could they do it without really – they weren't trying to harm or hurt anyone. They were just trying to get it done. It's interesting. At this point, there was one of the guys, who was an Australian guy, Mark. And Mark – I don't know Mark's name because I don't think they give it, but – Mark had followed him to France and had been with him during a lot of the sort of training, and they're larking about in the field or whatever else. But on the last trip where they went, he said, look, I had to pull out. He said, because I, as an Australian, and I think he'd studied law, he said, I could just see it was a very litigious society. If this goes wrong, now we're starting to get into it, like we're dealing with a very litigious society.
This is dumb.
Yeah. I don't think that he said, I don't want to be liable for the death of a friend. And also then he started talking about involuntary manslaughter, which sort of plays into if he hurts someone else or even assisted suicide. He said, these are things that I'm not comfortable. And it's
he's overthinking it.
And you know what?
That's what little Pete said.
Little
Phil said, oh,
so do you know what little Phil does? I get this impression that they just not quite cut him, but you're in it, you're not in it. So they call him the Australian. They won't even call him by his name. They always just call him the Australian. It's like, you became irrelevant because you didn't get to the bit where
take your anxiety meds, mate.
So it's about this point that it feels somewhat.
Is that how you say arsehole?
Is it? I don't know.
Trou-de-cul. That's it. Trou-de-cul.
Ooh.
I don't speak much French. Most of it's swearing.
Just important stuff.
With my outrageous accent.
Your accent is brilliant. And the thing is, when I was watching them and hearing them speak, I mean, the girlfriend who he had, like when he was younger, she is so emotional. And it's like there are bits where you'd cut to the Australian and he'd be talking, and you'd cut to the girlfriend.
Yeah,
and
mate.
Her eyes were massive, and she'd be like, oh my God, like she'd be crying with emotion. And it was so over the top. I was like, oh my God, the French are just a different breed. They really are. Yeah. It was so beautiful. You know, it was just, I had to, this is perfect time actually. So they leave, he leaves New York, goes back to Paris, and he's quite deflated and totally feels defeated at this point because Mark's out. And so the whole idea is he can't do it on his own. And he needs people that he can trust and people that understand what they're trying to achieve. So his friend, everybody sort of has a role, but with one person out, it doesn't quite work. And he doesn't want the girlfriend there, so she's never allowed to go to New York. She's not part of that at that point or anything like that.
Oh.
Anyway, so
it's like a bank robbery where they've all got a role.
And that's exactly right. So he goes back, and it's at this point he's in a
gang. Aren't they? They're a gang.
Yeah. And so it sort of failed at this point. He goes back to Paris, and then it's so funny that you should say it's a bank robbery, because then the girlfriend is interviewed, and the girlfriend at this point hasn't been allowed to go to New York. They've been keeping her out of New York. She hasn't really been a little person. All of a sudden, and she goes, I see my role, I see my role is I have to build him up. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. You know what I mean?
I have to build him up. Yes. And also I am the getaway driver.
Yes, and I'm the one
I am the safe cracker.
He becomes obsessed with watching.
You can get through that vent. I'm very small. I'm the only one. I'm getting to the bank to crack the vault.
You are so on the money. That he gets back to Paris in this mood. Anyway, the girlfriend then has her role to build him up, and she says then he becomes obsessed with detective movies and cops and robbers of bank robberies, and he's watching modeling behavior on how to get in, how to get out, and that's all he does. He becomes obsessed, and he just watches TV and that kind of those films non-stop, trying to work out a way, how is this going to work? Because he'd spent all of this time from when he was in New York, once they actually opened the World Trade Center. So remember, he's flown over the top. He's done his trip to the top.
He's done a lot. He's done a lot to get that far. To feel like you're going to stop there is bad. I get it.
But what happens? And he's been sitting in the reception, like the massive foyers, watching people, modeling behavior. What are people dressed in? How do Americans look? How do they interact? How do people show their security passes? How do I get into these buildings? Who are we going to be? Should we be white collar workers? Should we be tradesmen? We need to get our equipment in. So many things are happening.
Do not want to look like Marcel Marceau. It might give the game away.
It might give it away. So the coup is looking not so cooey and a little bit kind of not going to happen-y. So back in Paris, they are working. How are we going to do this? And I think
I love you say that they're working. They're not earning
watching
any
movies.
bucks. Yeah, we're just watching movies. What are you doing? I'm working.
So they've done as much as they can in France. Like it's just the stuff that needs to happen will need to be based in New York because they need more help. And as it turns out, the next trip, which will be the final trip to New York, whilst little Phil, looking like Marcel Marceau or trying not to look like Marcel Marceau, is sitting in the foyer.
Oh.
A guy walks up to him who works in the World Trade Center on the top operational floor at the time, which I think was the 82nd floor. And this man, no word of a lie, in real life has a moustache that is like handlebars.
Moustache. Yep.
He's cool. He's got a ponytail. Whatever. He walks up to him and goes like, what are you playing at? Like, what are you doing around here? You stick out like a sore thumb, which of course is exactly not what
he's trying not to do.
And he goes, what? Oh, what do you mean I stick out? So he goes, I've seen you perform in Paris. And sure enough, this guy, when he's been in Paris, has seen him like walking on a tightrope or juggling or doing something like that. And he goes, what are you doing here? Why are you here all the time? He goes, I want to walk between the world trade. He goes, oh, all right then. Well, maybe I can help.
Come up to my office. I'm on the top floor.
That's kind of what happens.
What's the chance of that?
So through him, he goes, well, actually, we're getting new ID cards. I mean, if you saw the ID card, it was so bad. It's a bit of paper. Anyway, so they modelled some ID cards
Not biometrics then. Not face recognition and fingerprints.
No, crayon. I have access to all floors of World Trade Center.
It's so crazy, but I can't.
A stick figure likeness.
And this guy is interviewed, like this guy, and he still looks the same. He's still got this crazy move. He's fabulous because you couldn't make it up. But so as a result of that, it starts to all come back together again.
Did he work in an ad agency? Because it
wasn't. It was like you think it was.
It was like some ad agency, ponytail and the moustache and sure, I know who you are. Yeah, I'll get you up there. It just feels like an ad agency guy.
It does. It does. And it absolutely wasn't. And again, going back to how the World Trade Centers were viewed, the towers, the World Trade Center, singular, not plural, there was a lot of empty, unoccupied floors. Went over. They couldn't get people to move downtown. They didn't want their offices there. It wasn't really considered the heart of anything. Certainly coming from Midtown, where a lot of business were operating, you had like Wall Street and the financial district is off. I would say off to the left, but you know what I mean. It's slightly across. This was a whole repurposed sort of dead zone that they created.
Bit like Docklands in Melbourne.
Canary Wharf was yes. So
Canary Wharf.
It wasn't all sexy businesses and banking businesses, which ended up occupying a lot of it. And I don't think that. I don't know though, but that beautiful restaurant and the Eyes on the World, what's it called? The World Trade Center restaurant that was at the top. I don't even know that existed at this point. It wasn't as coveted as it became.
It wasn't a place to be.
No, exactly. So it wasn't
literally
all beautiful.
Like the Docklands 15 years ago.
I'll tell you, watch the documentary because it's actually really good. And when you see the card, you go, oh God, I could have done that at home. It didn't look exclusive or it wasn't for a bank. It was like
official.
I think there was something like a roofing company. It was something weird, like it was quite
literally a stick figure.
It was like industrial or it was like just logistically, Anyway, so they've now got access to the building, showing how to do it. They've got their cards and they're trying to work out, okay, what are we going to do? So who's going to go into what towers?
That's crazy.
And essentially, some are going to go in as workmen and some are going to go in as white-collar businessmen, depending on which tower they go into and how they do it.
Blue. So blue and white colour, blue one side and white the other.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Which is which?
Do you know what? I probably could have told you the day. North. Yeah, it doesn't matter, does it? So I'm now going to take you to the coup and whether or not it happened and how it all sort of transpired. So the target date was August 7th, 1974. So it feels like it's quite quick, actually. Like it's only a year after they've done the Sydney Bridge Walk. That was June 73. But a lot of stuff had been going on in the background, and then there were lots of changes, and it was always this sort of moving feast. They were trying to do stuff, and they were modelling stuff, and it was always trying to come up with different things and how they were going to get that cable across. They had been practicing in fields, both outside New York City, because they didn't spend a bit of time there before it actually happened, and obviously in France. So on the night of Tuesday, the 6th of August 1974, Philippe Petit and his crew had a lucky break. So they had planned to be able to access their friend's floor, which was the 82nd floor, because that was as high as they thought they'd be able to get, and they thought they would have to store their equipment at that level and then get it up to the roof. So what you have to be mindful of is I think at the 82nd floor, that was the highest occupied floor. So everything above that still existed, but they were empty. You know, like when you see in movies and it's all, bits of plastic whistling around and it's just a shell. It looked like a scene out of a movie where there was going to be a crime.
They hadn't been fitted out. Yeah,
correct.
Well, where all the bodies are stored. Yeah.
Or you shoot someone through the plastic.
Yeah,
yes.
Or
correct. That's exactly right.
You
need that whistling plastic. That's just attached to something. Yeah.
You see the silhouette.
It's not ominous enough if you don't have plastic hanging around for no good reason.
Exactly.
That's right.
So purely by luck, when they were getting into the freight elevator, so that was always the plan. The ones that were using to get the big cables up, they had to get into the freight elevator and get it up to the highest point. And then when they were getting in, someone said, "What floor do you want?" And then just by luck, I think they either chanced it or someone else said, and it went to the highest point. It went. So it went up to the 104th
This is
floor.
Ridiculous. 104th, there you go.
Yeah. So that meant that they still could have potentially got to that point, but they would have had to carry it up all the extra floors. So they were so lucky that when they got to that floor, they were able to store it, I think it was 19 steps from the roof. So that's a big difference to nuts. Several, like...
Yeah. Because I'm guessing we're talking a big steel cable. You said it was 60-something
60
meters.
Yeah.
Well, plus, because
the other part.
Yeah. And then the other two.
And then,
so they would weigh it.
So then you've got someone going up from up in the other tower. So I'm only talking about... I don't know, I'm actually really talking about one tower. This is the tower that Little Phil's in. And then the other two had gone in as businessmen into the other tower. And it was
are they receivers or are they receiving the wire?
The blue collar guys have the wire.
Yeah,
no, I think it's the opposite. I think the blue collars are shooting. I think the white collars are shooting. Yeah,
because I can picture the guy.
I think the guy who could. Yes, I think it is.
How are they getting the rope in then?
I'll tell you that. So they've
in the freight.
Oh, they've freight already stored some things in that guy's office in one of the things. So they've been able to access things and get some things in. So it's very complicated. Right. I don't know all the ins and outs.
They've been building up to it.
Yeah. So they've got different points and they're getting him to take stuff up. I don't really know in great detail how that works, but basically there is some stuff stored. But what is interesting in both situations, and it's not written anywhere, but certainly in the documentary, you find that both sets of people get stuck because there are security guards on the unoccupied floors. And it is like a movie where they are walking around with a torch and they've got a desk and all they do is sit there and wait. So in both instances, and remember, they weren't communicating.
Donuts.
They couldn't communicate.
It's starting to feel like remember an early video game. Like it's you get to a certain level and then you're stuck, whether it's Donkey Kong or whatever, because there's something above you that is not letting you get there. That's what it feels like to me.
What I found really hard to get my head around with when because this bit is all reenacted and they show this in the documentary, both sets have to hide for several hours. And they get there at as there's knockoff time, sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock.
And then
they both encounter security guards to a point where I think Petit Phil is hidden, but they go to fall over something, and there's an exposed beam, which I don't understand quite how that beam, but it's been between two floors, and they get stuck into it with a tarpaulin over the top of them, and they can't move for hours. And this is the guy who's going to be the tower worker.
How are they communicating with each other?
They're not. So those pair. Not at all. It's like no communication. So the two who are next to each other under the tarpaulin, nothing. The other two who are in the white collar ones, they're behind a plastic flapping thing. And they have a pen because they're the business, and they have to write to each other to communicate. They're able to do that. Because what happens is the guy comes in and out and they can't look. And in the end, one of them, in the ones where they're under, he puts a hole through the rug to get an idea of what's going on. They see night has fallen and it's still ours. But what I found interesting about that was they were able to communicate with the other pair, right? So if one pair had got up and been waiting, they would have thought something's happened.
That's what I was thinking.
It just so happens, right, that when the security guards go and they finally leave and they can finally make a run for it as such onto the roof, that they get to the roof, doesn't say within what period, but I think it's a fairly close period, which is, oh, hurrah, hurrah. And they're looking across and they have to wait for this, what I think is just so romantic in size. The lights that come on and off to flick for the planes, the high buildings.
Yeah.
So there'd be like a silhouette and then the light would come on, they'd be able to see each other. So they said once they got used to the rhythm of the lights, that's how they were able to sort of communicate with each other. So before that, like it's sort of you're in the darkness. Are they there? I could imagine the joy that they felt when my God, we've actually made it, because both pairs would have thought, we've screwed it up. We haven't made it through. They'll be up there or wonder what they've come into contact with. And at that point, they were able to have I guess that is a CV radio. They were able to then start communicating with each other once they got
10-4, Rubber Ducky, we got ourselves a convoy.
We got ourselves a coup. Now they're up there and now it's time to start setting up. So you were right, Schmitty, all that time ago. You said, how did they get it across? And this is really hard for me to explain, and I hope I do it justice, but I'm just going to read it out because when I watched it, I couldn't really get it. I'm having to read it.
A giant crossbow type thing.
To pass the cable across the void, Petit and his crew had settled on using a bow and arrow attached to a rope, and it was a fishing line to start with.
Oh, yes, I get it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thing, and then that's your tracer, and then you drag the heavier cable across. Got
and
it.
they had
I was thinking a bow and arrow with the tightrope. Like, that's
so that's what they'd been practicing so many times. They had this particular technique, and they'd done it. But that was it was so light. It goes and it lands, but they can't find it, and it's in the dark.
Yep.
So the businessman pair have
because it landed in someone's chest.
It's landed. No.
One down.
So this is where I cannot believe this really happened, and this is not made for a movie. This is what they did. Little Phil gets his gear off because he can't find it, and he figures that if he's nude, he'll feel it against his body. So
Little Phil is just a dirty perv who likes to
Little
get
Phil
naked.
Takes his clothes off and he's crawling around waiting because the smallest gust of wind, and he feels, I think, against his thigh, and that's how he gets it. And he said he reckons within one more gust of, like, not even a gust of wind, a breath of air would have gone. It was literally just caught like the edge of one of the girders or whatever. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, wow.
It's a girder?
Yeah.
Anyway,
so he felt it on his thigh. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I can't believe I said that.
He feels it on his thigh a little too frequently.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry.
I just feel like his friends, when they're practicing all of this in the countryside in France, Phil would just get naked all the time. They go, oh, God, here he goes again. And so then they're on the World Trade Center. It's the only way I can find it. Yeah, right, little Phil. Just do it quickly.
If I just get my knob out and little dance.
Oh, there she is. Oh,
I've got it.
As opposed to, I'm stuck in the wire.
Oh, I can feel it on my thigh. Yeah, right. Righto.
It's like they don't really go into it until they're getting dressed again. But anyway, there you go.
Bloody Phil's at it again.
So they get the wire, and then from that point on, that is then attached to a larger rope, and then they start the process.
Can I just ask the important question? Does he put his clothes back on at this point?
Do you know what? They never touch on it. I do know that he does, but they don't talk about him re-robing.
He's going to get a terrible chill. He's going to get a terrible chill up there in the wind.
Frostbite on the old
This is the
chilling
stuff
on the
I'm
willy.
watching, and I go, is this who
innie.
does this? These people are mad. And this is when things go slightly wrong in the sense that the first shot, so they get across, he finds it, they start doing the ropes, but what happens is the big steel cable drops. when they get across, so it goes down, and it feels like it goes down for forever, kind of thing.
Not all the way,
not all the way down, but it's so far down that they then have to spend hours manually trying that. Like that could have been the end of it, right? Because the cable just went too far down, and so one of them on one side. Two of them on one side, and it's the businessman side. They have to manually, with their hands, of course, manually,
with their bare hands,
recover, if they can, this steel cable. It has gone so far down. Cable, yeah? It's steel cable, yeah.
Shit.
And that takes them
60
hours. Their waist, basically, that's from, I don't know, by the time they get on the roof, I think it's probably midnight. It is
freaking hungry.
It's so late. They're starting to, it's taking out, and basically it's just, it could all go wrong, and there's nothing they can do. They've got to try and they can't see it, right? It's pitch black down there. They're trying to pull this.
They're just pulling it back up, yeah?
So they were heavily delayed because of that. That was not the plan, and also
you're not happy with that, Schmitty?
No, I can't see how it took that long to pull up a cable.
Anyway, they didn't know if I was going to do it, and they did. They got it up, but by the time they did, it was nearly before dawn, I think, if I understand that correctly from the documentary. And then they still have to put those, what I called it something, I think I called it cavaletti before, but it's also the guy lines. They've got to anchor it once they get up there. Yeah. So they still have to do those ones that we talked about. And there we have it. Shortly after 7 a.m. local time, Philippe Petit stepped out on the wire and started to perform.
I can't believe it. They didn't go and get breakfast first. I mean, your point.
They said they were so physically exhausted they couldn't believe that he was going to do it.
No,
and they just didn't know if it was going to happen. He was 1,350 feet, 410 metres above the ground. He performed for 45 minutes, making 8 passes along the wire.
And no one saw it.
He walked, danced, lay down the wire, and knelt to salute workers. Where it gets really quite,
great.
I don't know, it's beautiful really, is the girlfriend, and she talks about it and she's crying. So she and all of their friends, so not the ones who were like up the 4 up top, but everybody else involved, they were downstairs throughout the night waiting. So remember, they can't see anything. They can't tell what's going on. They have no idea. They wait. No one's come down. There's no word from them. They don't know what's going to happen. Have they been arrested? Are they alive? No idea. And then shortly after 7 a.m., they see him come out.
Surely they just see this tiny little speck.
Correct. It is so tiny. It's unbelievable.
So pointless.
And she's saying, look up. And, in the footage, she's crying. She said, it was so beautiful. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, my God. And it was just because for them, it's not, it's certainly not for him. It's not a trick. It's a performance. And once he gets out on the wire, it's filmed.
Yeah.
There are photographs. He is smiling. He does have a balance, yes. Yeah. So they had to get that up there as well. Sorry, of course he has that. So he's got that. So he's holding that, but it is, black little slacks, and they've got a slight flare still. I'm like, God, he's going to win.
It's the 70s, of course they have.
Yeah. There's no such thing as no flare.
It was just amazing. So
I've got visions of him being like Freddie Mercury at Wembley.
Probably not wrong. Although he's a ginger, isn't he, though? He's like a ginger Freddie Mercury.
Yeah,
no, but just the performance side of things. Just going absolutely
absolutely loving it. Yeah. He was there. This is his whole life. There'll be never a greater moment. There was no fear. There was not any sense of this is all going to go terribly wrong. And, and you can see when they're interviewing the other people who are involved, most of them have like this sort of like little breakdown when they're talking about it, because I think that the pressure, they can realise the outcome of how differently it could have gone now. I think in the moment they'd all got so caught up in it, they were just got to get it done, and he was a man on a mission. Downstairs you've got, a crowd is gathering and people, I go, oh my God, how incredible. And of course security and police and whatever else are notified, and then they end up on the top, and there's this one photograph and he's in the foreground and he is grinning. And in the background, you've got these 2 policemen kind of holding. I mean, you wouldn't, as a normal cop, why would you want to be on the top of World Trade Center? Going, I'm not going to help. I'm not pulling him back.
Yeah.
So they're like standing back, like holding things, going, come on, off you get.
So when you're ready,
and he refused
return.
He refused to. So I don't know at what minute they got up there.
I'm great.
But 45 minutes.
Look at me.
Can you believe it? 45 minutes, and there's a policeman who's interviewed.
Oh, I mean artist. Sorry, my mistake.
The policeman is he's really poetic. Like he's shocked. He's he's this sort of squat sort of black man, and he just looked like a good guy, a policeman. He said I think I've seen something that no one else will see in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And he said he wasn't walking, he was performing, he was dancing. He said we called him back. He said, but I'm never going to see anything like that again in my lifetime. He said, and I knew that I was watching something that will happen once in a lifetime thing. Yeah. And he was so touched by it. It was quite beautiful. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. He was just like, I just can't believe what I've witnessed. That was unbelievable.
Incredible.
And the way they got him off in the end was
impossible.
They were communicating with the other guys. Incroyable. Incroyable. Yeah. We're going to get a helicopter to pluck him off. So in the end,
I'm sorry, did you say pluck him off?
Pluck him off.
Okay.
Yes. So he says, look, to be honest, he said things, I'd done what I'd come to do, and he said the weather was starting to change slightly. He said I could feel, I don't know if it's a precipitation, but there was either rain coming or the weather was changing, the wind was picking up. So he said, I'd done everything. I'd performed, and in that time he'd walked, he'd danced, he'd laid down on it, he'd sat on it, he'd saluted them, he'd knelt on it. It wasn't like he just went over once, went, done.
He did the round the world.
Remember
like monkey bars when we were little.
Oh yeah.
And you do the cut off, but instead of jumping off, you go round and round and round under your knees.
Yeah, impressive.
Jeez, he had a lot of awful bits of steel stuck in him afterwards, though.
Oh, lucky he wasn't naked.
Steel, he might have been at this point. Did he do that? Did he do a strip
dance
and then he put his clothes back on?
He was in his little suit.
I can feel it against my thigh.
I can feel it against my thigh. He comes off willingly, I guess, off his own accord. And he's arrested immediately, and they treat him not dissimilar to the Australian police did.
He exits.
He comes off of his own accord. Like,
he was plucked. He wasn't plucked off.
What are we talking about? Are we at a subject change?
That's because he could feel it on his thigh.
And it's interesting. So he's achieved this amazing feat. I mean, beyond amazing. And he says that the most dangerous aspect of the entire thing that he'd done, anything that he's ever done, he says from 1949 right up until that point, was in the next little bit when they grabbed him, they threw him down those the initial sort of stairs, and he thought he was going to break his neck. And he said that was the only time that I thought, oh my goodness, it's all going to go terribly wrong. I'm scared now. They're going to hurt me now. The damage is going to be done. That was the most dangerous out of the whole experience, because before that, at any point, I don't think that he ever really was thinking like that. But being thrown around scared him. Anyway, it's all good news. He then comes, they get him downstairs, and people are just in awe. He's immediately taken to a mental hospital where he's assessed by a psychiatric team to see if he is
a nutter,
unwell. And then it becomes a little bit of, showmanship in the sense that, he's quoted as sort of saying, well, I said to them, of course I'm not. Well, I need to be out with my people. I've just performed the world. I'm not crazy. You're crazy to have me in here kind of thing. Let me out. Well, they kind of do.
Well, there was he's extensive. Not crazy. He's French.
That's exactly right. He was a bit of a hero, of course, and people loved the fact that he had done it. So extensive news coverage and public appreciation for his walk. The district attorney dropped all formal charges of trespassing and disorderly conduct, and he dropped them on the condition that Philippe Petit would give a free aerial show for children in Central Park, where he performed a high wire act above Belvedere Lake, which is now known as Turtle Pond. So it's got a very nice sort of wholesome end to it. And that was where I was saying, there's a children's book. And, of course, there's a children's book about it. And
Did the Oscar winner come into it?
The Oscar winner, the documentary won the Oscar. So the documentary is called Man on Wire, and it's from 2008. And it's quite easy. It's nice. It's good. It's a good watch. It's a good watch. So watch I think it's only about an hour and a half. And he's interviewed, the girlfriends, all of them are interviewed because I think they're all still alive. And they're not together, so it's all one, everybody's view. And you can sort of sense when people came in and out of focus on what their jobs were, roles were, when they were part of it, when they, left, whatever else. And he's a true artist. He's quite arrogant. You know, he's very over the top. He's very French. He hasn't lived in France since. He's remained in New York, upstate New York now. But I got the impression that once he sort of found a little bit of fame, it did change who he was, and it certainly changed the dynamic with the group of people that he was with. Because, you know, when you're trying to achieve something like that, you need to have a degree of arrogance, I think, to think you can achieve it. But then when that arrogance comes with sort of notoriety, well, where do other people sort of fit into it? And there's this part in the documentary that is so weird. When he's let out of the court would be the court. He calls it the Palais de Justice. But on that first, that first night, he comes out, you know, free person, whatever else, and the crowds are gathering him. A woman grabs him and says something, you know, seductive into his ear, some American bird. So he goes to her apartment and has sex with her, and then goes back to the people that he'd done all of that with. And I don't think they were well pleased, including the girlfriend. And he goes, you know, it was an explosion of pleasure. You know, you could imagine, and you just go, mate. It's like, what about all your friends and everybody who helped you out, but he had to go. He said it was just a release, you know, it's a creative pleasure experience. And I was sort of like, yeah, that was a bit odd. But, you know, listening to him, that was very entertaining. That was stuff where like you watch, you just go, oh my God, this is crazy.
I reckon there's like 10 phrases you could cut out of this episode when you're editing it, Schmitty, and put them all together, and it would make a completely different story.
An explosion of pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
Mon Dieu. I had to explode on her face.
The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey gave him a lifetime pass to the Twin Towers observation deck, and he had autographed a steel beam close to where he began the walk. In terms of his response to September 11, it's really emotional, actually, and I think it's very sincere. And he said, you know, his first reaction was he had always called them my towers because they were his towers in that respect. He said, my towers became our towers. And he said, you know, I've seen him interviewed on, I think it was actually CBS News, and I think it was, when I say fairly recently, it might have been the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. And it's a nice interview. He's a bit older and he's a bit more, it's not necessarily humble, but
down to earth.
Well, they're not his towers. The whole frame in which you see what he did and how other people experience and look at the towers is totally different than when they were the towers that he had, you know, managed to, you know, well, incredible feat. Now it's such a loaded thing. And, you know, him talking about it and saying, you know, they've gone from my to our towers. But what I thought was really, really French and very artistic and really beautiful was he said, they were smiling at me when I did the walk. They enjoyed it. I could feel them breathing. I could feel them moving, which comes back to your idea that they're not stationary. There's that movement in it.
They do move,
he said they were moving. They were smiling at me, and it was this beautiful thing. They wanted me to do it. And I was like, oh, it was kind of poetic, and I really enjoyed hearing you say that. But that was quite nice, actually. I like that bit. Shut up! I like that bit. I quite like that.
They're not sentient beings. Oh,
no, but you know, everybody was willing him on.
Some buildings, yeah. Okay, his ego's egging him on, right?
I feel like you could make a Disney movie out of him dancing on the wire while the buildings sing along.
Oh. Funny you should say
that. Here we go.
It's not a Disney movie, but there is a movie called The Walk. And The Walk is a Robert Zemeckis film, who is Forrest Gump director. And he wrote the screenplay, and it was based on a book called To Reach the Clouds by Philippe Petit. The actor who plays Petit is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It's very similar, actually. It's based on it, and, you know, he was involved in the movie, but it didn't do great at the box office. And it was dedicated to the victims of September 11.
Yeah.
And it was released in 2015, and it's called The Walk. And it's also one of those films, I think a lot of it's done in IMAX because of I don't think I could watch it. I think it would just be terrifying.
Makes me
I don't think Mr. Acrofo, I don't think it's your cup. I don't think it's your movie.
The 3D, the giant things. But, well, that was an interesting one. Okay, so what do you see as the crime then? In my mind, patent stupidity, totally unnecessary, waste of everyone's time. But, you know, I suppose one might say, oh, look at this, pushing the envelope, I'm sure you could do this sort of shit legally.
I thought the crimes that we could look at were like more as what if? What if one single thing had
someone, or that cable fell and you know, sliced people, because imagine the velocity of the cable falling.
Yeah.
It's a steel wire. It could have killed people. The damage.
He knows underneath.
Awful.
Yep.
God, who's the safety police?
No, but that's the thing. It would have only taken that. It's all fine.
And the fun police.
And then it's how people would view him putting people at risk. The accomplices. Because let's assume he would have died, right? All those other people.
I can't believe that they said, isn't that lovely? As long as you go and perform for some kids in the park, you're all right. What a joke.
Well, they say it was the beginning of the changed relationship for New York with the World Trade Center, because they said that all of a sudden people saw them as a little bit more human. And then after that, there was also a man scaled them, crawled up them, and somebody else. And, then people started to, accept the World Trade Center. So it was all, from a marketing point of view, that's why he was invited back, and he had the novelty.
The observation.
The observation access. But, what would you say I think it's more what would have been the outcome if one thing had gone wrong. Lots of things had gone the wrong way, but if that wire had fallen, he would have died for certain. If or the wire had hit anyone beneath, who would have been liable? So the accomplices would have done jail time, involuntary manslaughter. Their whole lives would have been destroyed, as opposed, I think they just went back and had normal lives, except for Philippe Petit. There you go.
I love it. I reckon the single-mindedness to go, I am going to do that, and I'm going to take all of these steps. Like my equivalent amount of single-mindedness would be going, I don't know, I'm having... I can't even think about it. Like, I don't plan anywhere near.
We're going to have friends up for the weekend, and we're going to have an awesome time. We're going to have
the
the best roast, and we're going to get the spa ready, and we're going to have all this beautiful wine. It's going to happen.
We're going to model that.
It. We model the behavior. Yeah.
Year after year of planning, and I don't know. I think it's so impressive. And the other thing I think is the way that stuff breaks up the monotony of normal life is fantastic. Imagine going to work and seeing that and just going, wow. I think the closest thing we've had to that is walking around Brunswick when we used to live there, and we used to always see the hot air balloons. And they were,
but they're legal.
Beautiful to watch.
Bullshit.
No, but then one of them went into a tree, and so you've got this stuff that's beautiful that you watch every morning. And go, wow, and then one of them goes into a tree, and you're like, wow, that's crazy. So
yeah, but they're legally allowed to go off. They're allowed to do that. And yes, they are beautiful, and that's fabulous. But no, I'm sorry. This man was a rule-breaking dickhead who, if something had gone wrong...
A rule breaker? It's like a truth stretcher. You're a rule breaker.
We haven't heard about the truth stretcher for a while. We haven't heard about that truth stretcher.
You're a rule breaker, and you must be punished.
The issue for me is you put your ego ahead of all other safety for everyone else, right?
Your art ahead.
No, ego. Come on. It's all about, look at me, aren't I marvellous? The fact my towers, I mean, how offensive. Yeah, fuck yourself, little Phil.
Little Phil.
I'm not having it. He's a dickhead.
You're really not having it.
Even, poor old Mark the Australian who just said,
Australian.
I reckon we've gone a little bit far here, this is dangerous. These are all things, you're dead to me. You're dead. Yeah. The more Australian.
You're Australian.
You're gone, wanker. So I'm going to sentence little Phil and his little gang of dickheads, apart from Mark, who at least had the sense
little gang of dickheads. Little gang of thigh feelers.
This is descended.
This is so beautiful.
You've got it.
Integrity.
You got to watch it for that now.
Emotionally. Oh my God! Go, just get a life, lady. So no, we're having it. So they're all. I'm going to put them all in the Bastille, even though it's been
well done, darling.
But they're going back to Paris, back in the olden days, and I'm putting them in the Bastille, and they can just rot in that horrendous jail before it gets, raised after the revolution. Done.
That was tidy.
Oh,
bunch of idiots.
Jeepers.
I know you love France because I know your aunt was there, but
people like that.
One would think you're not a big fan. And to our vast French audience, I would say, if we have offended anybody, which I'm sure we have on so many levels during this episode, like every episode we do, we should just be called How to Offend People. That's what we do best.
Trial by
we are
offense.
so good. Yeah.
or offense by wine could go either way.
Our impersonate. We're equal opportunity offenders. No one's safe because we're just
culture killers.
We're absolutely right.
Culture killers. The little band of French dickheads. Is that it? The little band. You are really not going to like the girlfriend. I can guarantee you. I'm going to make you watch if you don't watch it, and you're going to be not well pleased. That is not going to be something. She's too. She's so. He literally left his big thing that they'd been working on for 6 years. Walked out the steps of the Palais de Justice, went and rooted some other bird.
I know.
And then before he even went back to this very band of very French dickheads and her. And then she was like, oh, I think we sort of had come to a natural end at that point. I was like, yeah, I think you had.
Yeah,
I think you'll find you had.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe you've
served your purpose here, love. Yeah.
You're a bit used, love. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
French.
There's the crime.
Yeah, that's right.
Root rats.
Right there.
Root rat.
She was quite happy to be, getting into the bank vaults and working out how to break into things for him. Yeah. What a dickhead. Anyway.
He had to have his explosion of pleasure.
Clarky, on the other hand, is going, let's celebrate this mofo. Yeah, right.
I think that's because Clarky might be like he's a closet, he's like a closet sort of artist, with his little black flares and ballet pumps.
Yeah. No, I literally don't get any excitement out of art. So I don't really get it, but I think it's great. Maybe I am a rule breaker.
It's just, I like it. Wank. It's just an unnecessary wanky nonsense that added no true value to the world. If it had never happened.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about true value, but I think, wow, if people have a dream and they can achieve something like that, what a great feat.
More valuable to the world than just tightrope walking across between two bloody buildings. What a dickhead.
Oh, but it wasn't just two buildings. I just think what an incredible feat.
Yeah, great.
I just think, I don't know. And
what an incredible.
It was a different time. And I find it quite, well, I don't know. I was laughing at some of the quotes that were associated with the documentary, and people saying it's beautiful, and it's it is a little bit. Schmitty is signaling a wank. Schmitty's doing a little bit of
It's a
imagine that in the 70s. It'd be incredible.
Yeah, I thought it was incredible.
Incredible today.
I think it's more beautiful than, what do they do now? Is it called base jumping, where they jump off buildings?
Yeah, base jumping.
Because people have done that since, but I think people have been allowed to do it.
It's regulated.
And not that, correct. There's some things that have happened with that. That I don't find very interesting. But
that's right. You don't find anything that's permitted and safe and appropriate interesting. It's only because some dickhead.
It was in a leotard and slacks that I like it. And a ballet pump. He's kept his shoes.
Imagine if someone was to do that, the regulations that they would put around it, like there'd be safety nets and,
David
Blaine does dumb shit like that too. Not that I'm a fan there either.
Oh, I'm not a fan of that. So I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite, yeah.
Sits in a box for 12 hours.
Sits in a box.
And
we haven't had to watch any of that for a while, have we? We haven't watched that. How long ago was all that stuff?
No one cares. Because it's dumb. And it's the same as this. It's just
sitting in a box for 12 hours is very different to tightrope walking.
It was more than 12 hours. That was me just being funny. But
for any amount of time, it's no fun.
44 days.
Yeah.
A little bit
more
longer.
than 12 hours, yeah. But
was that in the shopping centre? Was he the one?
It says it was above the Thames. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I remember. It was just...
Oh, God, I live there and I don't remember it. There you go.
Snores,
blocked
Phil.
it out.
September 2003. Oh, no, fair enough. He did have to fast. Now I'm listening. Oh, I would be hungry.
Of course he had to fast. He had to have had water because you die if you don't have water after 3 days.
Didn't he go into like a trance or something? Isn't that the whole thing?
Oh, who cares?
Move
there's
on
there's an article underneath where I've looked at it. It says David Blaine's glass box stunt lasted as long as Liz Truss's PM.
That's a good one.
So if he did it for no other reason, I think that is a fabulous headline.
Yeah.
So you two think it's beautiful and artistic and no crime, nothing to see here.
No crime, no foul.
All right, fine. Well, a load of old shit. Okay. On that note then, well done, Swanny. And no one got murdered, and that was nice for a change.
It was
Quite
a nice
refreshing.
I could manage it. It was COVID appropriate content for me, and I didn't. I was not sleeping, but it was not because I was fearful that I was going to be strung up into a gynecologist chair and had be attacked by someone. Yeah, so that was nice.
So that's funny because the last three we've done have been not particularly dark at all. So we've had a good palate cleanse. So I look for
back to the horror.
Time to change that.
Well, I must be the next story. Oh, I better go work on something really nasty now then, because we've had 3 light ones. Whoa. Yeah, I reckon I can bring it. Okay. All right. Well, excellent work,
Swanny. The artistic crime of the century? I'm not sure if I'd call it that.
Yeah, no.
I would. No. I call it
I think there'd be other stuff.
I reckon piss crossed was the artistic crime of the century. Piss in a bottle and call it art. We did that hoarding thing and people got 16 bottles of piss.
Now that's art.
Tracy Emin, she had that stupid unmade bed that got taken out and put in the Versace Museum. Well, that was worth billions. What a joke. I mean, art, what a load of old shit. Well, on that note, piss you already.
See what you did.
Oh, God.
All right.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com. Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.